Welcome to the Moon Baby Magic Podcast, a space to honor women's rites of passage stories. From menarche to menopause, the initiations of womanhood all live within our wombs. We are here to reclaim the sacredness of all of them. I'm your host, Natalie Elliott, birth keeper and women's coach specializing in womb wellness and hormonal healing. Ready for slow and sacred storytelling? Let's dive in. Hey, women. Thank you so much for being here on the Moon Baby Magic podcast. My intention in everything I do at Moon Baby Magic is to support women in coming home to the sacredness and power that lives within their very bodies. So if you'd like to go deeper, a few resources for you. You can follow me on Instagram. I love to connect with women there. You can get the Womb Cycle Spotify playlists, your period prep guide, book an in-depth one-on-one virtual session, or shop herbal goodies. All of these are always included in the show notes of every episode, and I hope that they support you. Thank you. Let's get on to the show. Welcome back, women. Today on the podcast, we have Briana Girard, a woman who has chosen massive transformation for herself and her family. Briana shares her stories of being a young girl, not knowing her bodily anatomy, going on birth control because she thought she could get pregnant on any day of her cycle, working as a nurse and having a C-section, to her transformation, learning the Fertility Awareness Method, giving up birth control for good, speaking to her baby in her womb, and intuitively knowing he was okay. She began honoring her womb and her cycles and free-birthed her second boy in total peace and power. Briana's story has a true, beautiful arc of growth and personal responsibility, and you'll love the way she passionately, openly, and honestly tells her story. Let's dive in. All right. Welcome, Briana. Thanks for being here. I'm excited to dive into your story with you.
Thank you so much, Natalie. This means so much to me. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, of course. So, as you know, the first question I always ask the women on the podcast is to share what phase of your cycle you're in, as well as what phase of life you're in.
Okay, so I'm going to answer those, I think, in reverse because I am currently in the mothering phase. I have two little boys, under 2.5. So that being said, I actually I've only had 2 cycles since 2021. So yeah, so I got my cycle back with my first around he was 15 months, and I got pregnant 2 cycles later. So I've only had 2 cycles, yeah, since like I think July of 2021. So yeah, so I'm currently in the postpartum phase of kind of this weird. I feel like I say I'm in like a tideless ocean. Like I feel like I'm kind of just like, you know, swaying back and forth and not really cycling, but also cycling at the same time. Um, so yeah, that's where I'm at there.
That's such an interesting space to be in. It's funny. I've had like 3 women on the podcast in the past couple weeks that like aren't cycling right now. And it's funny because for the first few months of the podcast, I didn't have anyone who wasn't cycling. And then now I'm having a lot of like new mothers on, and women who are still in that postpartum period, and women who um, I had Megan Persephone on a few weeks ago, and she like hasn't had a cycle since 2020, and because she obviously did like and got pregnant on the first one back with her second.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's really, I can imagine, an interesting phase to be in, and I wonder like what that feels like for you, because being in a cycle, it's like this very predictable rhythm. So tell me,
Mhm.
like, how does that feel?
Yeah, so it feels very disorienting at times. I'm not gonna lie. I also mentioned to somebody recently that I actually feel left out sometimes
Oh,
when people are like talking about whether they're bleeding or ovulating on the full moon, and I'm like, but obviously so happy for them. But I just can't. I actually like I'm creating such a positive, relationship with my bleed. I just am one of those rare postpartum moms, I feel like, where I just really look forward to that first bleed postpartum and kind of reorienting and kind of building that relationship up again. Yeah,
Mm.
so it's definitely, it can be very strange. It can be very disorienting. It can be very like you look to your cycle for answers sometimes when you're feeling a certain way. Um, and so I think that's the hardest part is I look for answers. I actually am tracking my basal body temperature. I still track cervical mucus this postpartum. Um, and so sometimes I still try to look for answers in those kind of ways. But yeah, it can be a little bit disorienting at times.
Yeah, I can imagine so. And what it brings up for me is like perhaps there is this time for you to be, we do look to our bodies and to our bleeds for answers so often. And perhaps there is this time to like, find those within yourself without your body kind of being like, oh, well, it's my luteal phase. That's why I feel this way. And maybe that's part of the motherhood initiation too.
Definitely. And then I think the big thing for me too, that I kind of try to focus on, is I really make sure that like my body is nourished, that I'm, moving my body, that I'm taking care of, my nervous system regulation. I'm doing these things as if I were to be cycling. That way, just keep that kind of like even ground. So, because it can kind of feel like you can spiral sometimes when you don't have your cycle to kind of anchor into. So I just make sure all of the other components that I would normally be taken care of are being taken care of, and I find that definitely helps ground me when I'm not like anchoring into a cycle.
I love that. And I feel like that's such good medicine for women who are listening to this and are in the same phase of you. Um, because yeah, it's like, I mean, I haven't had a postpartum, but I know from having a phase of life where like my cycles were super irregular that it felt hard to take care of myself because I didn't know and I wasn't very versed on like tracking my cycle and stuff. And so I wasn't aware of like what phase I was in even at that time. And it felt very disorienting to not be able to like place myself in time and space. And so I imagine it can be really grounding to have these self-care rituals and nourishment rituals that keep you in your body even when your body's not doing its cycling rhythm. And of course, like postpartum is such an important time to be nourishing your body, so it's like you've got to be doing that anyways.
Exactly. Yeah, that was perfectly put. Thank you for that. Yeah, that's exactly what it's like.
Yeah, well, take me back. I would love to hear, I often ask women about their menarche, their first bleed on this podcast. So some women remember it and some women don't. Some women remember the time around it. So take me back. What do you remember there?
Yes. So this is like the perfect place to start for me because I do feel like this is kind of where like this blood mystery is the one that kind of set me up for failure in a sense,
Mm.
which it often does, right? So I'm not alone in that, I'm sure. I'm one of those ones that I don't remember my first cycle, my first bleed at all. And when I first listened to a podcast, and I don't remember which one it was now, and they were talking about it, I was like, oh my gosh, I don't remember. And then I was like, this is heartbreaking. And I was like, why was it traumatic? I first immediately was like, oh, like it was traumatic. That's must be why I don't remember it. So I actually gained the courage. I just asked my mom. I was like, so did I like, what was that like for me? When was it? I don't even remember when. How old was I? And she told me, and I just assumed like I must have been young. That's why I don't remember. Like maybe I was 9, and I just like wasn't, I don't know. But she was like, no, you were 13. She was like, your friends were all getting their cycles, and you weren't, and you kept being like, why am I not getting it? And I don't remember any
Wow.
of that. And I find that to be really interesting because I am like, my husband always tells me I'm like a lockbox. Like I have memories. I remember so much. I have a really strong memory,
Wow.
especially even like when I was younger. I do. So to not remember that, I still haven't found that answer yet as to why my body or my brain is kind of suppressing that memory. But some things come to mind. So I was a competitive swimmer when I was younger.
Okay.
And so when I did get my period for the first time, I remember the couple things I do remember about it was like, okay, we have to figure out you have to insert a tampon. Like, you have to get a tampon in, you have to swim, you can't miss practice. Right. So like that's the first thing that I remember about getting my period and then immediately being like, you have to hide it and you can't miss practice. You have to go to some practice. So I'm gonna share this kind of it's not really embarrassing. It's kind of a lot of women probably go through it when they're younger and forced to insert something foreign into their body when they are so young. But I remember trying to put a tampon in. My mom told me how to do it, and I went into the bathroom and I took this cotton tampon and I tried to stick it in my urethra because I was so young that I didn't even know what my vagina was.
Yeah.
Like, I hadn't been oriented to my vagina or to my yoni to even have that relationship to then insert something foreign into it.
Yeah.
And I remember, I'm like, chills. I remember being like, it's not going in. Like, it's not going in, mom, and it hurt so much. And she was like, well, maybe, you're not doing it right and whatever. So long story short, I did end up figuring it out and I put it in the right spot. And then I used tampons.
How did you
But
figure it out? Did you ask someone or did you like look up a
I
guide?
just like, I think I eventually put a mirror and was like, what am I even aiming
Okay.
for? Like,
And it's
I didn't
crazy
even
that
know I had two holes there, like
exactly that's what I'm saying.
it's,
It's like crazy that like we like our
yeah,
first initiation into like our body is trying to put something in it and we're like we don't even know where the blood is coming from.
yes, yes. It's looking back, I'm like, well, yeah, of course I forgot about it. Of course my brain didn't want to remember that. This like amazing, like, or initiation into womanhood,
Yeah.
and I was kind of told to like shove this thing up there and get back to practice,
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so fast forward a little bit. So then obviously I like, kept inserting tampons. That's what you do. You insert tampons. You don't know. I don't even know if anybody told me how long to leave them up there.
Yeah.
I was probably just, I don't know, taking them out when they started to feel uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next kind of like fast forward was when I was in a monogamous relationship. And I was like, okay, so I don't want to get pregnant. So I have to go on the birth control pill, right? That's like what you do because you don't want to get pregnant when you're, 17 years old. So, or however old you are. And here we are again. If I wasn't oriented to my yoni and how to, and like where it was and where the blood was coming from, I definitely wasn't oriented to how my cycle worked, how getting pregnant works, your fertile window and all of these things.
Yeah.
So I was one of those ones that's walking around still thinking that you can get pregnant from like the semen on the toilet seat of the public bathroom,
Yeah.
like, so of course, I go to my mom and I'm like, I don't want to get pregnant. I want to go on the pill. To my kind of surprise, she says, no, no, you can't do that. But she didn't tell me, how to then, how do I navigate not getting pregnant? So I was kind of stuck, like, she was like, there's a bunch of side effects. It's going to make you gain weight. You don't want to be on that. It'll make,
Good
it'll
for
make you,
her.
I mean, good for her, right? It was good advice, but the only advice she forgot to mention was like, how then do I not get pregnant, right?
Yeah,
Like,
very important.
yeah, and as like a young girl, I didn't know how to find that information. I didn't. I also thought I knew it. Like when you go to health class, they teach you that you can get pregnant every second of your
Yeah.
cycle, and you're just terrified. You can, you'll still get pregnant if you wear condoms. All of these things. So it's like I was just terrified. My mom had me really young. I saw how that shaped her life, which now, of course, her life is beautiful. But I didn't want that for me. I wanted to go to school. I wanted all of these things.
Hmm.
So I just didn't want to have a slip up. So what did I do? I just went and got on birth control, on my own.
Yeah.
So I can pause there if you want me to, or I can kind of just keep rolling.
Yeah. Well, just tell me, so this was, you said you were 17? Did I get that?
So I was 13 when I had my first bleed.
And then the birth
And
control
then birth
was
control, I think, was around 17. Yeah.
17. Okay.
Yeah. And then
So
I was
those,
on that for like 10 or more years. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I say this, I feel like on almost every episode. It's like
Yeah.
I got my period and then I got on birth control. And it's like tends to be this like second initiation. And so if women haven't heard that here before, it's like this sort of like warped rite of passage is what I've been calling it of birth control that like actually most of us remember more than our first bleed. We remember like going on birth control and in a way it's like kind of the rite of passage of like becoming like entering into your sexuality for a lot of women. And so that is a rite of passage. But like as we know, or maybe you don't know, maybe this is the first time you're hearing this, if you're listening, like birth control really like fundamentally changes who we are on a hormonal level. And so it's like these are like your formative years as a girl. Like I actually was just writing about this earlier that like our maiden years, which is that phase before motherhood, you know, when we're like a young girl until whenever we have kids, like our maiden years are for like discovering who we are and like getting to know ourselves and coming into that. And like for so much of the population of women, that's just like totally gone because they're on this like pill that changes them on a hormonal level and changes who you're attracted to and what you like and like really like dims your emotional response. So yeah, with all that being said, like how did you notice that when you first went on it? Like when did that become apparent to you? Or like what were those 10 years like?
Yeah. So yes, to everything you said. And I experienced all of that. It was a complete fracture of who I was. I almost feel like looking back, I was reflecting on this a lot before coming on the podcast. Like I truly didn't know who I was. It was like my body was trying to become this person and it couldn't
Mm,
because I was putting these harmful chemicals into my body every day. And I would have glimpses of who she was because I'd come off of it every once in a while. I was like a serial monogamous relationship person. So, like when I was in a relationship, I was on birth control, and I would tend to be in relationships for long periods of time.
mm,
But if I wasn't in a relationship, I'd be like, oh, okay, I'll take a break from birth control because in your mind, you know it's bad for you. It's not like you know that it's not great for you. It kept weight on me. It made me very hormonally imbalanced and very irritated, very, very like explosive and like not myself. But so I'd get glimpses of her when I
mm.
would come off of birth control. And I would be like, oh, wow, like this feels amazing. And then, I would like meet somebody and get in another relationship and like go back to this person who was like not like I don't know. It's honestly hard to describe, but you feel it in your body when you're out of it. Once you're free
Yeah.
of it and you see yourself kind of your reflection of who you were back then. It's actually so clear to see that I was just this young woman trying to become who she was or who she's supposed to be. And 100%, my maiden years got completely robbed from me. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm grateful I was never on birth control for more than the only time I went on it was for like 3 months when I was in college and um I remember feeling like it was a time when like I was going through like sort of a big trauma and so I went on birth control and when I had been going through this like big trauma like I was obviously very emotional and then going
Yeah.
on birth control it was like all of a sudden I was like weirdly fine but not fine it was like it was stuck
Hmm.
like almost like I was just walking around in like a fog and so I can imagine that's kind of how it feels for women who are on it long term where it's like you're just like something's like not right but it's like hard to like really place it. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, 100%. And I think the biggest thing, so I was listening to Nancy Lucina talk recently about, and this resonated with me so strongly because this is what I missed. So she was talking about how she is now or was teaching her daughter how to speak to her womb and how
Mm,
to listen to her womb and how to look for it, like, or ask for answers from her womb. And it's one of those things where when you're on birth control, you are completely fractured from your womb. You do not have a relationship with your womb at all, or any of your reproductive tracts.
mm,
And that's, I mean, scientific as well. But it's like, it's a complete hormonal fracture. And so that being said, how could you come into your own as a woman, when you can't even communicate with your your womb, that the womb space that is going to guide you through your life, give you a child. So yeah, I definitely think that yeah, it's heavy, it's really heavy.
Yeah, and like I'm just holding you in my heart because so many women have this story, and like it's heavy for most women who like
Yeah,
just didn't get to have these yeah, these years. And of course like you still find yourself. It's not
yeah.
going to like totally take away your
Mhm.
soul, but it
No.
it dims it. And one thing that comes to mind for me is like that quote. And I feel like I always forget where this quote comes from,
It's
but
okay.
I think it's no, I don't know, but it's you can look it up later and find out where it comes from, but
Okay.
it's at menarche a girl meets her power, and throughout all her cycling years she practices her power, and then at menopause when her cycle leaves she becomes her power. And so
Oh wow.
I share that quote with my friends who are like going into the menopause portal a lot for that reason, like becoming your power. It's like a lot more powerful than society's representation of menopause. But I
Totally.
also like it comes to mind for you with like and women who have been on birth control because these years are meant to be like practicing your power. And like
Yeah.
I just wonder what it would be like if we had a society full of women who like never went on birth control and there was just like all this like untouched female power. Like
It would be insane. I always say though, it's because like the system's not broken though. Like it's working perfectly as designed. They don't want it.
yeah,
They it would be too powerful. It really would.
it would.
Yeah.
So when did you wake up to like not wanting to do this anymore with birth control?
Okay. So yeah, this brings me to my mid 20s. So I meet my now husband kind of like right at this shift, which I find to be an interesting kind of place to meet him.
Mhm.
I'll add too, I never wanted kids. Never. Like I always said I didn't want kids. I never babysat. I mean, I was like, I don't want kids. No, that's not for
Wow.
me. Yeah, which is wild looking back on it now because I cannot even imagine like motherhood has actually made me who I am today, changed the complete trajectory of my life. Um, but yeah, so I meet my now husband. We fall in love. We're living on Nantucket, and we fall in love. And it was right in this time where I was coming off birth control. I was finally like, all right, so there's got to be something else, right? I still haven't gone down the like fertility awareness method rabbit hole yet. I haven't like learned about my cycle yet. I haven't woken up that much. Because yeah, okay, so I'm going to go into really quick. So I'm also like fully indoctrinated into the medical system at this point. I was a registered dietitian. I'm preparing to go to nursing school. So I'm like in it, I'm like allopathic medicine is, where it's at. So I go and I get a copper IUD because I'm like, oh, no hormones, no
Yeah.
problem, right? Makes sense. I'm like, in my medical brain, I'm like, okay, so there's no hormones. It's still going to prevent me from getting pregnant. So it's perfect. Um, so obviously we all know that it's not perfect. It's horrible. Uh,
Well, say
the,
more about like how that affected you because maybe some women aren't don't know that.
yeah. So what I was thankful for in that is that I felt like I was able to meet my husband and grow our relationship and fall in love being the person that I was, right?
Mhm.
So I was like my authentic self when I met him and when I fell in love with him and he fell in love with like the real me. Because I wasn't being, like manipulated by my false
Yeah.
hormones of birth control, right? So that I like look back and I'm so thankful for that. Um, but the copper IUD, I mean, anybody who's got an IUD placed knows that it is the most excruciating thing ever. They wrench open your cervix, they shove something I mean, no medication, nothing, no sedation, no pain medication. It doesn't like, matter if you would take it or not. You would take it if you had to do this.
Mhm.
Um, Yeah, so they insert this, copper T, IUD, and they're like, "No problem. You can leave it in for 12 years." I think they recommend 12 years. Um, so mine only lasted 3, but I always had very, like, well, I think, right? So I was on the birth control pill a lot. So I think my periods were pretty regular and light and non-painful when I wasn't on birth control. Obviously, we know that when you're on birth control, your periods are not real. They're kind of like fake
Yeah.
periods. So I got this IUD, and my periods were excruciating. It was like every
Mm.
month I was laying in bed, hot packs on my back. It felt like my body was physically trying to birth this IUD. It was like,
Oh,
get this
of
out.
course.
Of course it was. It's so smart. And it was like, it gave me that same full body no that birth control did. And looking back, I didn't know I was getting that full body no until, years later, looking back, reflecting back. Because I wasn't talking to my womb. I didn't have that relationship with my womb yet. So I wasn't able to kind of like ask for like, advice from my body. I wasn't listening to my body at that point still. So long story short, I go to nursing school, I graduate, I'm like fully in the, indoctrinated medical system. I decide my husband and I get married, or we're planning our wedding. Um, I get my IUD taken out about a year before. I knew I wanted to prepare my body for pregnancy, so I stopped drinking alcohol, which I haven't drank since then.
Mhm.
Um, I did a lot of things to prepare my body nutritionally. I was eating liver. I was doing all these things. Um, so I take my IUD out. We find out we're pregnant. Um, it was about 5 cycles later. It was 4 days before our wedding, so it was a nice wedding present.
Wow.
Yeah, it was really fun. It was fun timing. But
That must have
I
been fun to, like, go through your
yeah.
wedding, like, knowing that information.
Yeah, it was really fun. It was really special. It was like my husband knew. We ended up actually like blabbing it out to his sisters, and because they were like there for the wedding, and I was like, I can't not
Yeah.
tell them. I'm like, I'm so
Yeah.
excited. It's my first pregnancy, right? And yeah, so we were just so excited. Um, and where was I going with that? But anyway, yeah. So we find out we're pregnant. I took a million pregnancy tests. Because that's what you do. You just take pregnancy tests over and over again. The months leading up to getting pregnant, though, I was convinced my body was broken, right? So we're like trained as women, to just assume that our bodies are just broken. So it was like month 2, month 3, month 4 goes by, and I'm just like crying in the bathroom with these negative pregnancy tests. At this point, I did actually start learning about my cycle, and I learned fertility awareness. Of course, that's when people learn, right? When they're trying to get pregnant.
Yeah.
And I was kind of like, what do you mean that I only have 4 or 5 to 6 fertile days? What do you mean that I should be looking for this amazing cervical mucus that literally is like a firework in the sky telling me that I'm fertile? All the temperatures. I was tracking my temperatures, and I was just like being blown away. Um, so anyway, yeah. So
Well, what did it
what?
feel like to when you heard about FAM, was that when you decided you want to conceive, when you kind of learned
Yeah,
about how did that what did that feel like?
it felt like the best kept secret. It was like I felt betrayed on so many different levels. I
Yeah.
was honestly like, I couldn't believe it. I was like, why couldn't somebody have told me this at 13 when
Yeah.
I had my menstrual cycle? And instead of saying, no, you can't go on the pill because it's going to make you gain weight and make you like not emotionally stable, why not say, but this is how you can naturally prevent pregnancy for your entire life? And
Yeah.
also, you can have a connection with your womb space, and you can live this embodied life that you've been searching for your whole life, right?
So true. Well, and
Um,
it's because like, you're talking about speaking to your womb, and it's like some woman may be listening and thinking, like, how do I even do that? Or how do I communicate with my womb? And of course it can be this like deeper thing where you put your hands on your womb and you like listen for messages, whatever. It can be that. But it can also be as simple as like tracking your temperature every morning and looking for the cervical mucus and knowing what phase of your cycle you're in and how you're feeling. Like that's how we communicate.
Mhm.
And so when you're not taught, because fertility awareness method, it's not just for preventing pregnancy or like achieving pregnancy, it's for body literacy and having a relationship with
Yes.
your body.
Yeah, that was said so beautiful. It's so true. Um, and yeah, sometimes your womb doesn't necessarily have to give you answers, but just having a relationship, knowing your body, knowing your cycle, knowing how the external environment plays a role on your physical body. It's so powerful, and it's just something that we're robbed of, or so many of us are robbed of at such a young age. To then find out about it when you're trying to conceive just feels like it's kind of a betrayal. But I was so excited. I wasn't going to let that get me down.
Yeah.
So kind of walking through, I had a very medicalized pregnancy,
Mm.
obviously, right? So when you're in the medical system and you're a nurse and you do all the things, right? So I go in. One of the things that stands out to me the most is uh, I go in for my six week. I had like a little bit of spotting, so I called the office. They're like, come in for an ultrasound, no problem. I'm like, okay, I'm only 6 weeks pregnant, but okay, sounds fine. Maybe they'll do blood work. I go in, they're like, okay, we're all set for your ultrasound. Go ahead. Go ahead in. And I was like, with my husband, I'm like, okay, we go in. And I'll never forget, the woman looks at her pad and she's like, looks up at me and she's like, you're only 6 weeks pregnant. What are you doing here? And I was like, oh, like I had a little spotting. So they had me come in. And she was like, okay, well, lay down. Hopefully we see something. As if, like, so you're telling a first time mother essentially that her baby like might not be there. I
Oh
was
my
like,
God.
I was choked back tears the entire ultrasound. My baby was beautiful, and I remember her being like, "That's the heartbeat." And I looked at the screen and I was like, "My heartbeat or my baby's heartbeat?" Like you just showed me my baby's heartbeat, and that was how you told me. Like
That's insane.
I was outside of my body. I was like, I don't understand this experience.
But
And
that's what
then
they do, like, it's so just, like, routine, there's no, like, reverence tied in, it's
no,
just, like, totally, like, they're bored,
yeah,
and it's so
yes,
sad because it's, like, I truly believe if you don't think every single pregnant woman coming to you is a miracle, you should not be working with them.
I 100% agree. And unfortunately, I wish I could tell you that the rest of my pregnancy wasn't like that, but it was like one after another of like bombarding me with just like negativity and stress. So then fast forward to my 20-week scan, they found an choroid plexus cyst, which is they called it like fluid on the brain. Um, the woman, of course, that I really loved, she was like a midwife, but a hospital midwife, was with a apprentice or something, and she had the apprentice tell me, and the apprentice told me that like she like misspoke or didn't like orient herself with the circumstances well enough, and she pretty much told me that my baby was gonna have trisomy 18. So I left there, but they were like, but he might not. And so I left there in absolute shambles. I Google it in the car. I'm a mess. I'm like, it was it was 72 hours of just pure, just like out of body experience. But I bring this up because it was the first time that I spoke to my son in the womb, and he spoke back. So this is kind of where I start to wake up a little bit. So like I start to be like, whoa, like medicine might not be at all. And there is like something really powerful going on here. Um,
Mm.
so I sat with these emotions and I just cried on my couch for the whole night. And I just tried to talk to my baby. I was like, are you okay in there? Like, what's going on? Please give me a sign. Like, I just need to know that you're okay. And if you're not, just let me know. So I go to bed. I wake up the next morning and it feels like Christmas morning. I wake up with this like euphoria. I feel so good. I'm like, what is happening? And I felt him. He was like, Mom, I'm okay. Like
Oh,
what they're talking about, what they're talking about, I don't have that. Whatever they're talking about, I'm fine in here. I'm like happy, I'm fine. I'm chilling. And I remember being like, holy moly. Like
yeah.
This is crazy. And I had a ultrasound scheduled, like a level 2 ultrasound scheduled, because they wanted to like do another anatomy scan to make sure he didn't have any whatever. I almost canceled it because I was like, I know my baby's good. He told me. But at this time, it was like still too fresh, right? It was like I felt like I
Yeah.
was like still needed to check all the boxes.
Yeah, you're still in it.
Um, I'm still in it. So yeah, my pregnancy goes on. I go to every appointment. Nobody can ever get my blood. I'm like a pin cushion, all these things.
Mm.
Um, I go to approach my, I'm like 30 weeks, 36 weeks, whatever. They do an ultrasound. Of course, my baby's breech. So they're like, well, we can do, of course, you can't deliver a breech baby in the hospital. Nobody will deliver. So they're like, well, we can do an ECV. And so for those of you listening, if you don't know what it was, because I was a nurse and I had no idea what they were talking about, it's an external version. So they actually try to externally move your body in the womb from breech position to head down. And I was like, me being my nursing self, I'm like, perfect. That's what a solution. This is a miracle, right? Like they can just turn my baby. I had I had it done. It was at 37 weeks. It was the most painful thing ever. The nurse that was training again, like stuck the medicine that's supposed to like calm or like lessen the tone of your uterus. She put it in my arm like 3 seconds before the procedure. So it didn't work. It just left me like shivering, shaking chills for like an hour afterwards because she
No.
administered it at the wrong time and it wasn't. So yeah. So fast forward again. They were like, we'll try one more time. Right. So like you still can't deliver your baby. Of course not. He's
So
still
it didn't
breech.
work.
No, it didn't work. No, it was
I'm like,
failed.
does it ever
Right. It
work?
never works. No, it never works. And half the time you flip the baby and the baby's like, no. And they flip back.
Babies are intelligent. Like they know what position
They
they want to be born
know.
in.
They know. They know. And I'm still convinced that either he was going to be born breech or he would have flipped last minute. So,
Yeah.
um, but then I wouldn't have gone on this amazing journey that that I went on without him. So, yeah. So they're like, okay, we'll try it again on the day of your C-section. So we'll prep you for the OR. We'll try to turn him one more time. And if he turns, we'll just unplug everything and you can go ahead and have your natural birth.
As a
Yeah. So, and in the moment, I didn't even realize like what that even meant. So you meant you're going to drug me up, turn my baby, unplug everything, let all of the drugs wear off, and then induce me. Like it would have been, honestly, it would have been human torture. I told myself and my son that he truly just did me a service. So they bring me into the OR after putting an IV in and nicking my radial artery. My hand is like limp and a mess. And I go in, I'm holding this nurse, like I'm wrapped around this nurse. Her name was Briana. I tried to like use that as like a connection point. And I'm behind me and she's like, just calm down. I'm shivering. The OR is freezing. I'm just like so scared. They put the spinal in and I'm hearing them in the background and they're like, oh no, a little over to the left. Oh, a little over. Oh, pull back, pull. And I'm feeling like shooting pains up and down my spine. And I'm like, in my head, I'm like, what is happening? Pull, okay, now push in. And then, okay, lay her down and like lay me down like I'm some kind of farm animal. A student did my spinal without my consent.
Oh my God.
So I looked back eventually and there was two people. One of them had a student written on the side. And I was like, and I could hear them talking. And afterwards they were like, oh, you did such a good job. And I was like, I just
You're like,
didn't.
this is my life. This is my actual life and the most important moment of it.
Yeah. Yeah. So they lay me back. They immediately, like, they don't even give me the discretion of like letting my husband come in before they spread me open and are shoving catheters and stuff into my body. So he walks in and I'm like, it's supposed to be this amazing moment. Uh, and I'm embarrassed because my husband sees me like strapped down, legs flying with them sticking stuff into my body without him even, and so he walks into that. But of course I'm allowed to like have my music because it's like a gentle C-section. So at this point I still think I might be having a version. So they're like, all right, we're gonna spin the baby now. So they start to spin, and my goodness, they put so much force on my womb and my baby, my waters broke. They broke my waters. All I heard was, and all the nursing students that I definitely didn't consent to have on the back wall watching this whole thing as if I'm like a science experiment, they all stepped back because my waters released all over the floor. And it was like a ocean tide right into their feet. And I remember the surgeon looked at me and was like, well, we're going in for a C-section because I can't spin a baby that doesn't have any water, that's not in water. And I said, okay, what do I do now? So I just told my husband, like, just make sure that I'm breathing. I remember asking him, just make sure I'm breathing. Cause I hear that like when the medicine gets to you, like sometimes it's hard to breathe.
Yeah.
So he was amazing. He just, just kept asking me like, are you okay? Are you breathing? And I mean, I'm one of the lucky ones that I didn't feel much. Like a lot of people say they feel tugging and pulling, and I luckily didn't feel that. I felt fear, so
Mm, of
much fear.
course.
Fear for my baby, fear for myself. I remember when my waters released, I yelled, I want to hear his heartbeat. I wanted to know like he was okay in there. Not that it mattered. He was going to be out in, who knew, 5 seconds. He was literally in my face so quickly, which I felt relieved in that moment because I just wanted it all to be over.
Of course.
Um, but yeah, so yeah, they did the incision. They brought him, through the plastic drape, and my baby was here. And it bothers me because I don't know how long he was gone for. Because as soon as they took him out, your fluid shifts, so my blood pressure dropped. And so all I remember is them trying to push medications to like raise my blood pressure back up, to like stabilize me. But I remember hearing his APGAR scores. They were like yelling out his scores, like his newborn scores. And they were like really high. And I remember like nursing, knowing that like, I'm like, he's good over there. Like I can hear his scores because he's doing so good. And then I don't know how long it was until I got him back, but it did feel fast in the moment, which felt nice. And they just like put him on my chest. And I remember him just like trying to do push-ups on my chest and just like loving him so much. And I'm really thankful too that through all of this, when I first saw him, I knew him. Like I felt like I had known him forever. And I was like, of course, like that's my baby. He was with me the whole time. He talked to me, he walked me through this whole thing. He was so strong for me. And so that was that. I spent the next like 12 hours like dry heaving into a bag, having him skin to skin. They were so nice. They like, of course, the silver lining, like they did let me have him skin to skin on me. I was just like naked with him naked on my chest for like, first 24, 48 hours. But yeah, that was my initiation into motherhood. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like parts of it have me in tears because it just like it breaks my heart when like
Yeah.
this really important and special moment, and like you said, your initiation into motherhood is like, I mean, it's like not, you can't really say taken because it's like there's so many choice points, but like is
Right.
not what you wanted it to be. And it's
But
really
on
sad
this,
to see that, go ahead.
I was gonna say, yes, thank you for that. But on also my journey of healing and recovery and kind of like making sense of it all, I was fully responsible for every decision that played out. I was the victim in all of it. I was begging to be saved. My baby didn't need to be surgically removed from my body. Um, but that's the choice. I made that choice. It felt like in the moment that I didn't have a choice, but I did. And kind of looking back, that kind of radical responsibility, like we make these choices. We make all of these choices for ourselves. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like a lot to come to terms with when it wasn't the outcome that you had dreamed of, that like you were the one who made the choices to come there. And of course, you didn't make the choice for how they treated you. You didn't make the choice for, like all the
Right.
nurses and
Right.
student to be there. So like there are parts that's like, okay, you don't have to take
Yeah.
responsibility for all of that. But it's, just to touch on that too, like it's actually like quite common practice for a teaching hospital, especially to have
Mhm.
students in there and like not disclose that at all, which is so absolutely wild. And I know
Mhm.
that these people have to learn, but like talk to the women that are
Yes.
again having the most important moment of their lives. And
Yeah.
it's not just this like classroom with like a robot. Like you are a
Right.
full grown woman having her child.
Yeah.
So that part, yeah, I get angry and up on my soapbox about that. But
Yeah.
it's interesting too to just hear like the sort of two different things that like this is in a lot of ways like there was a lot of trauma and fear there for you. And then on the other side, like this is a beautiful day in your life where you met your son that you had been communicating with and that you'd known and that you got to see in the flesh and you knew he was okay and there he was. And
Yeah.
yeah, I can imagine like that was a lot of different things flooding into you, which of course is how women feel after birth. But tell me a little more about that.
Yeah. Just to rewind, I remember, just to speak to what you just said, I remember the surgeon at one point, they were like gabbing about their weekends, and I remember the surgeon looked at me once and was like, sorry, this is just another day in the office. And
No.
yes, and I remember looking at her and looking at my husband, and I remember thinking, okay, well, I feel like I'm fighting for my life right now. Like I felt like
I
I was
cannot believe
fighting.
she said that to you.
Yeah, like not only is this like the birth of my firstborn son, you're about to birth my baby, but I feel like I'm dying. I'm actively fighting for my life because I'm being sliced open like a farm animal on a, I'm drugged to my neck. Sorry, go
Wait, so was this
ahead.
happening? Sorry. Was this happening while they were like doing
Oh
the
yeah.
surgery? Oh
Oh
my
yeah.
God.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. It's
Well, I
like
mean, it's like, you
beyond
know what? That's what they're
inhuman.
thinking, and so at least they freaking admitted it.
I know. I know. Gotta love her for her honesty.
Ugh,
But it was, yeah,
oh,
yeah, it's wild. It's just the disconnect. It's an unfathomable disconnect from humanity, from human, from just everything about it is wild. And I didn't actually realize the assault that I kind of endured until very recently. Actually, I'm still unpacking so much of what happened. I was reading Yolanda's book Portal, and she talks about obstetrical abuse, and I was like, oh my gosh, like I never like correlated my experience in the operating room with sexual assault, but that's exactly what it was. It
yeah.
was people sticking instruments into my body. Of course, I consented to them on paper, but no one was speaking to me.
Yeah.
No one was
It's
speaking to
not.
me. I was just like on this table, and things were being inserted into my body, and it's yeah, of course you leave your body completely, because how could you not? But I am also fortunate. I find that like postpartum for me was actually it was really nice with my son. So he like latched immediately. He was an amazing eater. We didn't have like, it was painful, but it was like nothing I couldn't handle. I just loved nursing him. I felt as though like they took my like natural birth away from me. So of course I'm going to nurse my son exclusively for as long as I possibly can. It was just this bond that we had together. And so it was painful. I mean, anybody listening who's recovered from a C-section, it's immense, immense pain. It's bleeding, it's confusion, and then you're numb to it all. So you don't start unpacking what happened to you until much, much later. And I can start to speak to that if you want me to kind of keep rolling with it, or
Yeah, go for it.
yeah. So it happens kind of around, I think my son was probably about 6 months. So I start to like go for walks when he's napping, and I put my headphones in. I start listening to like podcasts and books and stuff. And my friend recommended Freebirth Society podcast, and I was like, okay, like I'll listen to it, whatever. I don't know what that is. And then a couple days later, I was like, I'll give it a shot. So I start listening, and I listened and I listened and I didn't stop listening. Any moment I had, I listened, and I just couldn't believe my what I was hearing and listening to these stories of these amazing women. And just it was like the biggest like epiphany of my entire life. And for the first time I was like, oh my gosh, I cannot wait to get pregnant and have another baby. Like, because at that moment, I was like, I can't do that again. I cannot do that again. I cannot have my baby sliced out of me again. So yeah, so
Oh,
kind of,
actually, that brings
yeah,
me to another question before we get
yeah.
further. Earlier in your story, you were saying that you never pictured yourself having kids. When did that
Hmm.
change?
When I met my husband. And I do think that had a lot to do with who he is as a person. I mean, he's just like the most loving, funny, hilarious person I've ever met. But his heart is like just made of gold, and he loves
Oh,
his family so much. And I just was like, holy crap, this guy is going to be the best dad.
oh,
And I didn't ever feel like that with any of my other partners. And I think that's what it was. Like, I think a little bit was subconscious, but it kind of just organically happened because I was like, my gosh, like this guy is amazing. I do think though that it had a lot to do with the fact that yes, I had an IUD, but it was non-hormonal, and I think that a
right.
lot of that was that fracture.
So true.
My body was like, no, I don't want to have children. That doesn't make any sense for me, because I
Yeah.
wasn't even connected to my womb at that point. Why
No,
would
and
my
it's
body,
like,
why would my brain want to have a baby?
no, like the connection between the brain and the ovaries is disrupted. So of course you don't.
Yeah.
Yeah. Whereas like when you're not on birth control, I'm like every time I'm ovulating, I'm like, I need a baby now.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. That doesn't go away. It's really crazy. Yeah.
Oh,
Uh,
okay, yeah, take
yeah.
me back.
Okay, so yeah, so I go on kind of a spiritual journey, going through unpacking my son's birth, looking forward to the future, unpacking all of this. Like, holy moly, I'm a nurse. Um, I just spent all this money and time on this education that I'm now in
Oh,
complete
wow.
conflict with. Everything I learned, I now am like unlearning. And I'm programmed. I'm so programmed. I'm a textbook at this point people pleaser, right? Like, I'm a people pleaser. I'm so indoctrinated into this allopathic system that, like, you're a good patient, you go to your appointments. I'm a nurse, so I'm like administering medications, all this stuff. And I'm like pulled back. I am on maternity leave. I get like a job from home that's like very outside the nursing realm. It's like kind of just triage. I felt really good about it. It was kind of
Mhm.
more in alignment with like what I wanted. I was still a nurse, but I didn't feel like I was like kind of betraying this new person that I was becoming or like coming to know. Um, so I just am unlearning, unraveling everything that I had learned over the course of these years and years and years, like as far back as I remember. And it's
Takes
funny
a
because
lot of courage to do that.
yeah, I give a lot of credit. I do have to mention my dad here because I always made fun of my dad because I said he always wore like a tinfoil hat, and he always like, was like the conspiracy theorist. He was always like, he was on it about vaccines. He was on it about food. He was on it about all these things. And I would always be like, you know, let's go put on your tinfoil hat, like, my dad's like, he's crazy. And now I'm like, my tinfoil hat is so much bigger than his. It's like, I put his tinfoil hat to shame. Uh, and back then I thought I was earthy crunchy. I thought I was holistic. I thought I
Mm,
was like this, and I wasn't even close.
yeah.
But yeah, so I walk this kind of path of just like coming into myself as like who I feel like I've been looking for my entire life.
Mm.
I and motherhood really helped me with that too. So it's like I bought a crib. Baby never slept in a crib. I was like, what am I gonna do with that crib now? Of course I'm not putting my baby in a crib. She's gonna sleep with me, like, but allowing myself to like break that social
Mm.
stigma and allow myself to be like, no, like, no, I'm not gonna isolate my child in a room, and kind of, I don't want to go too much into it, but it's a little bit relevant in like my relationship with my son going to a pediatrician and watching my son be abused by physicians,
Mm.
physically held down onto a bed, screaming, crying, flailing to the point where he couldn't breathe. I'm
Oh,
yelling on top of my lungs to get their hands off of my son,
course.
and they wouldn't. And I finally grabbed the doctor's arm and removed his hand from my son. They were doing a polio assessment. He wanted to make sure my son's legs were the same length, as if, and of course, we were on a delayed back schedule at this point. So he thought that my son was basically, he had polio, of course, because I wasn't doing those vaccines. But that day, my son never walked into a doctor's office ever again.
Good for you, because
Never again.
even though like witnessing that sort of abuse should like light all mothers
Mm,
on
mm.
fire, like get off of my child, most of us are so indoctrinated and so disconnected that it's like, oh well, I guess that's what you're supposed to do. And good for you for letting your mother instincts ride.
Yeah. I took a photo of my son, like limp in my arms and my face just crying, like a selfie
Mm.
in the office. And that photo is like, I was like, you will never put your baby in this position again. Never, ever. Um, and like, cause why would I anyways? So like, that was it for like vaccines. That was it for doctor's office. That was it for like well visits. I mean, what are we doing? Like, what am I even doing? So like my baby is perfect. He doesn't need a doctor to tell him that he what is like a little bit heavier than he should be. Like, no, I don't need any of that. It's all made up anyways.
Yeah.
All part of the unlearning, right? So yeah, so I guess I can just kind of like I'm just like devouring all of this, right? So
Yeah.
I come into my next pregnancy. So I ovulated once and then I bled. And then, or, I'm actually not sure. My temperatures were a little wonky. So I'm actually not sure if I
Yeah.
ovulated or if it was like a little like, like it didn't actually, like my temperature like spiked and like kind of like, but the next cycle I did ovulate and my temperatures never came down. So I got pregnant second cycle. I was still
Wow.
nursing my first, yeah, and of course I was so excited. But of course, so now we're talking like this was not that long ago. I'm still like I took 700 pregnancy tests, right?
Yeah.
So I'm like still in that like, which I do love pregnancy tests. There's something really fun about
Yeah,
it's like the lesser of all of the obviously, the lesser of all of the evils,
for sure.
and they're like really really fun. And so yeah, I tell my husband we're overjoyed, and I'm like, now what do I do? Like, what
Mm.
do I do? So at this point, like, I'm still not on board fully with a wild pregnancy. So I remember being like, what everybody else does, I'm gonna hire a midwife. Of course,
Yeah.
easy. So I contact a midwife. She's really nice, whatever. We end up having like a really hectic something happened in our family. Everybody's perfectly fine, but it was like a really taxing, heavy time. It was about a month long and it was really tough. And I
Mm.
didn't feel like I could put myself and like kind of navigate that like midwife situation. I just couldn't wrap my head around it. I was pregnant. I was super sick. I just didn't have the energy. So I was like, whatever, I'm not going to hire a midwife. I'll just like go back to the OB. So I go back to the OB. I get my first ultrasound at like 13 weeks. It's perfect. I skip all of my appointments. I'm like, and here I'm like, I think that I'm like, I'm doing so good, right? I'm like not being a people pleaser. I'm still in the OB, but I'm skipping all my appointments. And they like call me, and I just skip them, which actually really worked for me because it kind of felt a little bit powerful for them.
That's
Like,
fun.
I just like didn't show up because I'm like, they don't care, right? They don't actually care if I show up. What
Because
are they
you're
going to
just like a number
a
to
number?
it's
Yeah,
like,
yeah. Half the time they didn't even notice.
yeah.
So I'm like, yeah, getting my appointments, whatever. So we go through. I end up getting the anatomy scan as well. Everything's perfect, thankfully. And then around no, it was earlier than that. It was like 24 weeks. They schedule me for a trial of labor appointment.
What? What
I'm
is that?
like, exactly. What it's made of. It's exactly. Um, so it's some made up term that has like fear mongering written all over it. It's basically like you had a C-section, so your body's broken. You can't birth. So we're going to have you meet with a surgeon to go over your birth plan or something. I don't know because I didn't go. Yeah. So I was like, whoa, I'm not going to that. And they were like, you have to. You can't give birth vaginally if you miss that appointment. I'm like, well, I can give birth vaginally
Like, I
because
can
it's what
actually
my
do
body.
whatever I want.
Yeah. So that was like, whoa, they're already channeling me into the operating room. I immediately was like, oh my gosh, like they want to cut me open already. Already. I'm 24 weeks pregnant and they already want to cut me open. They already want to fear monger me. They already want to to just break me down. So I think that I can't birth. So I didn't go and I was done. I was like, I can't go back. So something really powerful that happened kind of like probably starting about 20 weeks after that appointment is I was having night terrors about my entering the hospital, giving birth, and then taking my son. And I couldn't get him back. And I wake up crying, shaking. And they were every night. They were relentless every night. And finally, I was like, told my husband, oh my gosh, it's my baby telling me I can't go there. Like, it's my baby telling me that I can't go to the hospital or they're going to cut me open again, and he's telling me that he can do it. I felt him, I felt him be like, no, mom, like, I can do this. Like, we can do this. We can do this birth together and I'm here for you. And you can't go to the hospital. You can't. And so that was it for me. I was like, my baby told me that I can't go to the hospital. And I just left. I left at 24 weeks and I said, I sent them an email. I didn't even call. I said, I've like thought, I think I said that I was going with private midwives and please cancel all my appointments so they would stop bothering me. They didn't even respond. They don't care.
Wow.
They don't care. Uh, so yeah, so now I'm like, okay, I'm 24 weeks and I'm gonna have a free birth. I have to, try to get my husband on board, right? So that's like the next piece of this.
Mm.
And he was I remember we were up at like in New Hampshire and we were on a family trip, and I was pretty far along though. I like kept this quiet for a long time because I wasn't like fully ready to like have the conversation. I kind of just going with the flow. Felt so good. It felt
Yeah.
so good to be out of that system.
Like
I
out of
felt
the
so
drama,
free.
right?
Yes. I was like, oh my gosh, now it's just being my baby and I can do whatever I want. And there's no more like appointments to schedule. It felt really good. And then I remember we were up in New Hampshire, this beautiful cabin, fire burning, snow. It was amazing. And I remember being like, okay, I got to talk to him about this. Cause I was like 30 weeks or something like that.
Yeah.
So his initial reaction was like, but can't we have somebody there? Right. So that like is always like and I was like, okay, so yeah, we can. If that would make you feel more comfortable, like, okay, we can try to go down that route. And then so I talked to a midwife. She agreed to take me on late because I was already like 34 weeks at this point. Like once we got to communicating with her, whatever. And she was like, sure. I lived kind of far away. I wasn't in Florida like I am now. So she was like, whatever, yeah, sure, I'll drive that far. Da, 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 da. Which kind of is kind of crazy if you think about it, that she was willing to take on a woman 35 or 36 weeks pregnant. She didn't know me from a hole in the wall, yet she was going to be my midwife. Like the more I think about that, I'm like, I don't even know this woman. And I was about to let her into well, to be honest, I was never going to let her into my into my space, but
You
I was
knew.
gonna like not call her in time. But
Ah,
either way, we didn't end up going with her because she was so expensive.
mm.
And this kind of beautiful podcast the Freebirth Society put on was the one that Emily was on with. I think it's called Two Brothers or something like that, and they did like this whole unpacking
Oh, I
of
remember that one.
yeah, it was super powerful and it came at the perfect time for me and my husband, and he listened to it. And I remember he was halfway through it and he texted me because he was at work. He texted me and he was like, so we're gonna do it on our own. And I was like, yes, yes, we
Yeah, it's
are.
like sometimes like I think that the men are just afraid. It's like not
Yeah,
because a lot
that's
of
it.
people I think jump to like, oh, like your husband should just trust you. And it's like, of course he trusts you, but he's
Of
also like
course.
worried about you.
Yeah, of
And
course.
like sometimes like they just need to come to it on their own terms.
That's it. And I just was letting him. And I think the biggest thing was he was like, why are we going to give this woman like $6,000 or $7,000 for something that you can do on your own? And it was
Yeah.
funny because the first time I brought it up to him and he like had time to process and like think about it, his only question was like, but what do you do with like the cord? And I remember being like, Well, if that's the only thing you're worried about, babe, like, we got this,
It's
like, if
like
the
the very
cord
practical things. They need to know the practical
yeah.
things.
I was like, "If the cord is the only thing we're worried about, we got this.
Yeah.
It's no big deal." So, yeah, so we were all in. And then it was just like this beautiful oh, wait, one more thing about the midwife. I canceled on her, which I'd never given her any money. I'd never said yes 100%. I emailed her being like, "Hey, like, we've gone a different route. Like, I'm so thankful for your time." I had one meeting with her for like half an hour. I was like, "I'm happy to pay you for that time," whatever. She
Yeah.
writes me this horrible email about how she has to put food on her table for her kids and how all it was terrible. It was not like, "Oh my gosh, of course, do whatever's best for you and your baby." It
Oh,
was like, "You are terrible. I have food. I have to put food on the table for my kids as well." So it's just like a reminder that like she did not have my best interests in mind. She was not in my corner. She was not going to show up for me in an authentic way. She was going to likely find any reason she could to package me up and put me in an ambulance and transfer me. You know,
yeah.
it was just like a harsh, like it was perfect though. It
But
was like
she
that,
showed
like
you exactly who she was.
that's it. She couldn't have done it. And it was exactly what I needed because it was the exact like check in the box, like, of course this is who she is. And of course we don't want her in our home. Of course. Why would
Yeah.
we ever do that?
Yeah.
So the weeks leading up to my birth were just beautiful. I ended up taking, of course, because when you like stop outsourcing, you start to like look inward. And I was like, why am I going to work to my due date? That's ridiculous. So I took
Mhm.
2 weeks off, like 2 additional weeks, like before my birth. My son and I went for walks, and I just like got to like hold him and love him and just like spoil him the last 2 weeks, like before he was going to be a
Mhm.
brother. We took naps every single day. Like, if I could give this gift to every pregnant woman, I'm not joking. And this is the one thing: don't work up to your due date if you don't have to,
Yeah.
right? Take time, nap if you can,
It
go in the
sounds like how the,
tub.
like, last few weeks of pregnancy should be, like, a
Yes,
retreat. It's like a time for you to,
yes,
like, just fully take care of yourself.
yes, Natalie. It was my favorite 2 weeks I look back on. I just
Oh.
cherish. It was beautiful. My
Mhm.
son and I just had the best time, and we just cuddled and napped together and took baths together, and
Ah.
it was just like amazing. So yeah, leading up to birth, it was amazing. I got to just like wait for his due date, wait for his birthday. He got to choose his birthday, right? A small piece of this that I don't want to go too far into is like I kind of had to like isolate myself from basically everybody, because
Mhm.
no one knew I was free birthing, because no one would have supported that in my family. They would have fear mongered me so badly. And it's fine. That's where they are in their life. I don't like begrudge them for that, but I needed to like keep my like boundaries up in that respect. So my husband was kind of like batting out their text messages and keeping them away from me for the last couple of
Good.
days. Yeah. And I really felt when you give yourself time to really like look inward and sink into the portal of pregnancy and like moving through those last weeks, I felt like a little cat, like squirreling off into the closet to give birth. Like, I didn't want to watch TV. I was like, it was almost like I entered the portal like 2 weeks or a week before.
Yeah.
I was like, almost like on a trip. Like, everything was super clear. I didn't want any like noise on TV or text messages. Everybody was like, "Are you good?" I'm like, "I'm just like I'm in it. I
You're
gotta."
in it,
And I
yeah.
think that's like what the real like nesting might be. It's
Mhm.
that natural retreat. It's not like I wasn't cleaning my bathroom. I was like retreating and just kind of like getting my head right, getting my body right, and like
Mhm.
being with my birth, who was going to be in my birth space.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, so if you want, I can just kind of jump into birth.
Yeah.
So yeah, so my sensations, I was having sensations kind of on and off, like for like 2 weeks. Those 2 weeks, it was kind of like at night they would come, and by the morning they were gone. I joke because I'm like, I don't actually know if they were like my son kicking me in the back or if it was a contraction, because like sleeping with a toddler is like sleeping with like a wrestler. But yeah, so finally I woke up one morning and I was like, okay, like this seems like these are a little bit stronger, and they're continuing through the morning. So my husband was actually home from work, which worked out really well. He had training like later in the day. And I was like, okay, these are like there, but they were like consistent, but they were far apart. So they're only like 20 minutes apart, I think. I wasn't timing them, but they felt like far apart. And so we kind of just like did our day. We went for a walk. I took a nap with my son, kind of as normal, and I let the sensations kind of just like fall into the background. So my husband had to go to work at around 3, and I remember as soon as he left and I was alone with my son, I was like, wait, I think I might be in labor. I think I'm in labor. Like this feels like I don't think I can mom right now. Like this felt
Wow.
a
Yeah.
little intense for me. Because he was like 22 months old. So he was like ripping around, crazy boy.
Mhm.
Like I was like, whoa, I cannot do this by myself. So something really cute was that so I put on a movie for him, which he never got to do. So he was like glued to the TV. And I made him like something super kind of random that I've never made him before. And it was like pasta with butter with like peas in it.
Mhm.
And he loved it. He gobbled it up, but come to find out, my son my second son was born the next day. And my mom, I texted a picture of his dinner to my mom, and she was like, "Oh my gosh, like that was your great grandmother's favorite meal. It's like pasta and peas." And tomorrow is her birthday,
Oh.
and my son was born on her birthday. And I
Oh.
just was like, oh my gosh, like it's like when you open these portals, like they're open and like these people come into them, and it's just like amazing and beautiful. And I was just like, I cherish that. Pasta and peas is my favorite now.
That is
But
so special.
yeah. So that was really cool because I don't know why I made that, right? Like I've never made, it's not like a
But
staple in
you
our
were just
house.
like it's like you weren't overthinking it. You were just like you said,
Yeah,
you were already in the portal. You were already like trusting all these
yeah,
hits. You were available for it.
totally. I
Yeah.
was so available for it. And she just like gave me the gift that I didn't have to think about for dinner. And I made him pasta and peas. Um,
You.
so anyway, yeah, so that was a really special little tidbit. So yeah, so the night continues. I am like SOSing my husband. He kind of had a feeling that something was going on, so he didn't go to his like training. He just went to work, which was only 15 minutes away.
Mm.
So I'm like, I need you to come home and just like help me with bedtime, tubby bedtime, get me into bed. And so he came home, we got through that. I went to bed. I like cuddled my firstborn so tight. And I was like, I feel like, this might be the last time we sleep together alone. And so yeah, so sensations didn't really pick up until like midnight or 12:30. So I was like waking up being like, oh, that's uncomfortable. And then I would try to get comfy and it wouldn't work. And so I was like, okay, I think this might be it. So I'll hop up and just see where it goes. So I woke my husband. I told him, I said, please like lay with Andre, our firstborn, so he doesn't wake up, and just like cuddle him. And I'm just gonna go see what happens. I timed contractions once, right before I got out of bed, and they were about 5 minutes apart. So I was like, okay, like this could be it, or this could like go away, and I could be pregnant for the next 3 weeks. Because I was about 40 weeks, like I was like a 40 and like 40 and 2 or something like that. But I was like fully preparing to be like pregnant for 44 weeks, like
Yeah.
fully. I was like, I'm never gonna have this baby. Like we're just gonna ride it out. So yeah, so I went downstairs. It's like, of course, like I'm in denial, wicked denial. And that was like a beautiful part of the day before is I kept myself in denial the whole time. I was like, I had a really good piece of advice. Some woman, a wise woman told me, I'm gonna not paraphrase this correctly, but it was something along the lines of do life until you can do nothing but birth. And that was like the perfect mantra going through that first day of early labor because I was 100% looking back in early labor. But I was like, I can do life right now. This is no big deal, right? I was just doing life. Let me tell you, it is true. You can do life until you can only birth. So yeah, I went downstairs. I was like filling my water. I thought I could, sorry, can you hear my son?
It's okay.
A little, oh, sorry. I'm just gonna like push. Um, so I went downstairs. I was in complete denial. I was like, no, this is fine. I made some food. I was like, sat down on a yoga ball thinking I was gonna like bounce on a yoga ball, watch TV. No, I was like, I sat down, had a drink, and was like, this feels terrible. I have to go
Mhm.
have a baby. What am I
Yeah.
doing? So I like went back upstairs, drew a bath, the more realistic thing to do, lit
Love it.
some beeswax candles, and like got in the bath. And so I did that for a while. The sensations like really started picking up. They were getting painful. I was trying to keep the water on my back, but I was like, it wasn't a big tub. So I was like really big and awkward and like having to move around. So I was like, I think I'm gonna get out. This doesn't feel great anymore. And I put on like a birth affirmations track, which was like carried me through the whole time. It was amazing. Yeah, so then I kind of just like again being in denial did me did me dirty on this one because I didn't set up anything. So I kind of walked into our like nursery that wasn't a nursery. We just like kept like it was a reading nook and stuff like that for Andre. I kind of got on hands and knees. I was naked, so I just like draped towels on myself because I was really cold. I like turned the heat up and I got like all hunkered down. Like flipped a little tub over, like we had like a newborn tub ready, and I flipped it over and propped pillows, and I kind of just like rode out the sensations. Like they got stronger and stronger, and yeah, they were like very manageable in the beginning. I was kind of just like letting them sweep over me. It literally felt like I could ride them, like they were like waves. Like I was just like riding the waves, riding the waves, riding the waves, until I couldn't ride them anymore, and they got super intense. And so I'm assuming that's kind of when like my body was fully open, and then it was like my body also took over. Not that I had any control in the beginning, like, but you can kind of breathe through them. You can like, you can feel them go away. You can rest. You can kind of reset.
Mhm.
These next wave of contractions were definitely, those pushing contractions. I wasn't pushing, my body was pushing. It was unbelievable. And I've heard about them, but I had no idea how absolutely magnificent it was going to feel feel my body like bearing down and like, and my mom would say like, oh yeah, you're going to make noise during labor. And I was like, no, I'm not. I'm not a screamer. I'm not going to make noise. Let me tell you right now. Sorry.
Okay.
Sorry. Uh, like, let me tell you right now, my body was making noises that I have never heard before or since. It was
Wow.
unbelievable. Yeah, it was truly like nothing I've ever heard come out of my body. It was like this primal growl.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was necessary in the moment.
Yeah.
But that went on for, I want to say it was hard to keep track of time because I was by myself. So I remember being like, okay, like this is going on for a while. I remember texting my husband being like, take Andre downstairs for me because I don't want him to hear me and I don't want to scare him and I don't want to like lose my track, right? Like I already when they
You
woke
want to
up
be in it.
felt, yeah, I wanted to like stay in it, which is hard to not stay in it because it really
Yeah.
takes over. But yeah, so I remember texting him being like, take him downstairs, please. I don't want him to hear me. But something really interesting again happened where I felt like I was in this protection bubble. And I say it was my great grandma.
Aw.
The door was open. There was nothing that could have, we didn't live in a big house. There was nothing to prevent my voice from traveling down the stairs. They didn't hear me at all.
Wow.
Yeah, they didn't hear me at all. And I was like, there's no way they are not hearing me. Like, explode with these like growls. But
Yeah.
they didn't. So there was
Uh,
something protecting me from and them from my voice.
yeah.
Yeah, it was wild.
Wow.
But yeah, so I remember, that kind of went on. I was in and out of my body. It was just so incredible to be feeling these sensations and going through this after not getting to. I remember just being like, okay, buddy, like towards the end, I was like, okay, like I'm really ready to meet you now. Like please come to us. We're ready. I'm ready to meet you. I'm ready to hold you. And I remember at one point, like reaching, there was like a little bit of blood, coming out, and I was like peeing freely through the whole thing.
Mhm.
But I remember at one point I like reached in and there was like nothing there. And I was like, how have I been pushing for this long? And there's just nothing
Mm.
there. And I remember saying it out loud, like, how is there nothing there? Uh, and then I got really, and then of course I spiraled and I'm like, oh my gosh,
Oh.
it's my bladder. It's my bladder. I haven't been peeing enough. My bladder is blocked, like, my bladder's blocking the baby. He's not coming down. I was in transition.
Yeah, like
So
whatever story pops up is
yeah.
the story.
Yeah, but I like texted a friend. I was like, "Oh my god, what do I do? Do I call my friend who's an ER nurse to have her come catheterize me? Like, what do I do?" I was like full-blown transition freak out.
Oh.
It passes, of course. I'm like, "Okay, maybe I'll just walk to the toilet." Women give birth on the toilet all the time. Maybe that'll work for me, right? So I go to the toilet. I have one sensation there. I'm like, "Oh my gosh, no." I walk back, and that's like all I needed. I came back, the next sensation, my water's released. I think before that though, I reached inside to check myself and I did feel his bag of waters, which was like the most beautiful, like little bulge of life that just like felt so good. And I was like, oh, like there he is, right there he is. I feel him. And so then the next sensation, my water's released. It was just full of meconium and my obviously my amniotic fluid and little flecks of like his vernix, like that had fallen off him. And I remember being like, there he is, like that little specks for some reason were like, oh, like he's right there, like he's so close. And yeah, so it really happened pretty quickly after that. I think within the next hour, it was like it was like bearing down sensations got so intense, like to the point where I couldn't growl anymore. I had to like breathe and then breathe in and then breathe back out to kind of like get through them. And then I reached up inside again once and I was like, oh my God, what is that? It felt like a wrinkly egg. And I was like, is it the cord? And then I was like, no, it's not the cord. And I was like, but is it the cord? Of course, I'm like thinking I'm having the cord roll ups, knowing too much, right? This is like my nursing brain kind of trying to pop in and do that. I was never fearful though. I didn't feel fear. I was just like the questions popped in. So then I checked in and I was like, buddy, what's going on? And I remember feeling him being like, it's just my head, mom. Like, it's just my head. Just being born. It's my head. And I remember like laughing to myself, being like, duh, it's his
You're
head.
like, oh yeah.
Coming out of my yoni, it's his head. So like the next contraction, I'm like, it happened so quickly. I felt him like wiggle and descend. He must have rotated a little bit. I felt his little kicks, like he was kicking, like trying to kind of come down. And all of a sudden I'm in the ring of fire. And I'm like, if that is not the most accurate description of what was happening, the sensation is going, I'm feeling the ring of fire, I'm breathing through it, the sensation stops. And his head is half in, half out of my yoni. And I was like, I can't do it. I was like, he can't stay there. He cannot stay there for the length of the next, like the break in between contractions. Yeah. And so it was the first and only time I actually used my physical body to push. And so I pushed. Yeah, I did feel myself tear. But his head was out. And I was like, oh my gosh, I snapped one photo of his head out. My C-section scar is like full, like there it is, head out of my yoni. And then I waited and I just waited and I felt this like before the next sensation, I felt this like energy, this like I've never felt before, this like adrenaline energy. I was so excited and he exploded out. The fetal ejection reflex just shot him onto the mattress pad that I completely destroyed during birth. and I don't, so they always talk about that pause. I was alone, so I don't know if I did that pause. I may have to kind of orient myself to hit the cord and where he was, but I just remember picking him up and he was wailing, just so like vigorous and vibrant. I had asked him to be this way. I did. I asked him many times. I said, please, sweetie, like when you come out, just like give me a cry, just something. It doesn't have to be a big cry. It doesn't have to be anything crazy. Although I did not study, I don't like that word. I did listen to so many women, and Sister Morningstar does amazing talks on newborn birth breath. So I did feel very comfortable with him coming out and needing time to transition to earth. However, I was just wanted him to cry anyways.
Yeah. And you've got that like
did.
strong line of communication with your babies. So
I did. I did. Yeah, I was so thankful. And the craziest thing was, I was like holding this beautiful baby and watching him cry. And then I was like, oh my gosh, I gotta get Dan up here. So I yelled, Dan, baby's here. And he couldn't hear me growling, but he heard that.
Oh,
And he heard, actually, which is even more special, he heard our son's crying. And so we have like ring footage because we had like security cameras inside the house. And we actually have footage of him eating his breakfast and being like thinking to himself,
oh,
like, did I just hear a baby crying? Like, was it a
oh.
baby? But my son, of course, at the same time is squeaking a dog toy.
Yeah.
So it's hard. But then like, yeah, so then he comes up and we just like, he just was like, his disbelief was just like, you did it. Like, you did it. Our baby's right there. Like, you did it. And yeah, and then we sat there in just like absolute bliss for what felt like minutes, but it was over an hour. I ended up birthing the placenta. We did cut his cord after it stopped pulsing about an hour and 15 minutes later. I
Mhm.
explained everything to him that was, I was going to cut it, that he already like received his blood transfusion and everything like that. And yeah, and then we cut his cord and I birthed the placenta in the tub, which I was a little nervous for that because I know that that can be like a trouble point for people. And it was definitely more uncomfortable than I thought it was going to be, but
Mhm.
it was such a relief to get it out. And I was just like, birth complete. Like, get me to the
Wow.
bed. And yeah, it was in terms of like redemptive like feelings, it was like more than that. I know a lot of people call it like a redemptive birth. It was like I was reborn with my second son. Yeah. And now I feel like I'm the same person, but I am almost a completely different person who was walking that first pregnancy with Andre, with my first born.
Well,
Yeah.
it's I mean, I just love it. Like I'm just in awe of the whole story and it's
Yeah.
so powerful. And I especially love that you were alone. Like you don't
Yeah.
always hear that. And I feel like that probably was really powerful for you to just like fully claim that space because it was such
Yeah.
the opposite in your first birth. And also it's like this was a really intact initiation into motherhood for you. Like you made the choices each step of the way, Like
Yeah. Yeah.
that's
Thank you for
incredible.
saying that. I'd never really thought of that actually until you just said that about how like I always thought like I chose not to be witnessed because I wanted I didn't feel like I could be witnessed. I felt more comfortable being alone. But I had never put it together that maybe that was because I wanted to hold all the power and all the yeah, I'd never thought of that. So thank you for saying that.
Yeah, thank you for sharing your beautiful story. This is,
Yeah.
yeah, tell me like what happens after this? Like how does this affect you? How is your postpartum?
Yeah. So I always want to bring this to attention because I do think that postpartum is really touchy for a lot of women. And I want to say that even though I had a free birth, completely intact, nursing was a dream. It was hard. Postpartum is really hard, and I don't want like listeners or women to think that just because you have like a free birth and an intact birth that postpartum is like easy breezy.
Yeah.
It was a difficult integration. I kind of unpacked a lot of like trauma with like I realized that I was actually really trauma bonded to my firstborn because of his birth and things like that. But beyond that, we literally quit our jobs. My husband was a police officer. I was a nurse. We quit our jobs. We left Massachusetts. We now live in Florida. Neither one of us are doing what we did. Um, my husband owns a business and I'm raising the babies right now, but I'm fully in my like self-study journey to walk with women on the path to sovereign fertility, birth. I did do a radical birth keeper school. And I have a fire in my belly to just like spread the word of this, incredible life that is possible for every woman who is willing to let it be their reality and open themselves up to it.
I love that because it's like, it's like this choice to birth your baby on your own terms. It's like it sounds like it just gave you this courage and this window to make all these other choices to live life on your terms. And people say, or who is it? Someone I'm terrible not remembering who says
It's okay.
quotes.
I'm the same exact way.
It's that quote, it's like you birth how you live.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
and like you changed your life, you had this free birth, and now you're choosing each point of your life, which is such a beautiful, like, I love like witnessing women's story arcs, because it's like,
Yeah.
this first part of your story is like, well, I just got on the birth control and I thought that's what I had to do. And then I like had the C-section because that's what you're supposed to do, and whatever. And then all of a sudden it's like you jump out of that and you jump out of all of it. And you start choosing. You start choosing what actually is in alignment with you, because you're in tune with who you are and what your values are and what you care about. And we as women, we can have values, we can have these things, but to actually like make tough decisions in alignment with them, that's a whole other thing. And that's just so beautiful to witness.
Yeah, that was so eloquently said. That was beautiful. Yeah, it's so true. And I just, for the first time in my life, I do feel like proud of where we are and proud of who I am and proud of the decisions that I'm making and taking radical responsibility for every single one of those choices. And it feels so good when you're not in alignment with what you believe in and what you truly want for your life. It's so hard. It's so hard. It's my anxiety, you can get rid of so much baggage, and it really feels like you're living like in full authority. Yeah, and in full alignment. Yeah, it's
Mm,
amazing.
I love that. Well, Brianna, the last question I always ask everyone is, if there's a piece of womb wisdom you'd like to leave the woman listening, what might that be?
Yeah, I love that question. So I definitely would, I don't want to say challenge, but welcome women to try to tune into their womb and become acquainted with their womb. And I'm still on this journey. I am absolutely not. I don't think anyone is an expert, but I think learning your cycle, learning to live more cyclically aligned with your cycle. And then I think that something else that's not so much womb wisdom as it is just kind of life is that it took me a long time to realize that I can opt out of anything and everything. So just because our society requires you or lets you believe that you are required to opt into all of these things, you can absolutely opt out. And when you start opting out of these things that you are required to do, I think is when like your true self comes out and you're like can start living in true alignment with who you were meant to be.
Mm, so well put. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Such an important
Yeah.
thing for women to remember. Well, Brianna, it's been so wonderful having here. If women want to look you up online to stay up to date with what's going on with you, where can they find you?
Yeah. So right now, I'm just on Instagram right now. My handle is Ocean Tide Moon Cycles. So definitely follow me. I'm in my calling my woman tribe era. So come follow me just so we can get acquainted. And I'd love to meet you and maybe one day work together. But for right now, but yeah, that's where I'm at, and I'd love to meet and connect.
I love it. I actually have been in this like calling in my women tribe phase on Instagram for a while now too, and it feels so
Yeah.
good to make connections there.
Yeah.
And that's how
Yeah,
we connected.
yeah, it was the best. That's what I said. I was like,
Yeah.
that's how we
Yeah.
met.
Oh,
Thank
Brianna,
you
thank
so
you so much.
much.
Yeah, thank you for being here. Thank you for opening your heart and sharing your stories. And it's been such an honor to witness them. So thank you.
You're welcome. I appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for tuning in to the wisdom of the womb today. It's truly an honor to bring these stories forward. And it would mean so much to me if you'd rate and review this podcast so that it can reach even more women. If you're looking for deeper support, you can find the link to book a one-on-one virtual session in the show notes. See you next week.